Communism.
For many years, communism was the dominant economic system used in many countries across Eastern Europe and Asia. It has been one of the most influential economic theories of all times. Recognizing its influence is key to understanding both past and current events. But what do we really mean when we talk about communism? In this video, we will determine various concepts about this political ideology by distinguishing the connection between communism and Marxism, the difference between the communism and socialism, the current situation of communism, and its dwindling relevance of, and lastly, we will answer the question of whether or not communism is the ultimate solution for the world polity. Communism is derived from Latin communis, meaning shared or common. The modern idea of communism was first proposed by German philosophers, which are Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. Together, they wrote a short book known as the Communist Manifesto. In it, they suggested that someday the working class, known as the proletariat, would rise up and overthrow their wealthy employers. At that point, the proletariat would completely restructure society. One of the key principles of communism is the concept of a classless society. This led to a concerted effort by communist governments to eliminate anything that might be representative of class warfare or create class envy. To elucidate the blur, communism is a political ideology born in the 19th century that set as its objective the building of a classless society in which all means of production and all that is produced is owned in common by all members of society. Communism is like allowing the state to put in their hands the means of production. So, what do we mean by means of production? It is the social use and ownership of the elements that is needed to produce goods and services. With that being said, in this ideology, there are no private companies, but rather the state is the one who has power to control what is produced. Because private property is replaced by public property. Communism is an economic system where the group owns the factors of production. The factors of production that we are talking about are the labor, entrepreneurship, capital, and land. This ideology is often confused with Marxism for obvious reasons, seeing as they are both social, political, and economic theory that originated from same person and is deeply rooted on the struggles of the working class against capitalism. The in-depth connection between Marxism and communism will be further discussed shortly. Again, communism is an ideology that aimed to end the struggles of the working class from the abusive treatment of capitalist societies and had a goal of creating a communist system in which there is common ownership and an absence to social classes, the money, and the state.
There's a lot of confusion surrounding the connection or difference between communism and Marxism. There are people who use the terms interchangeably while others see them as a completely different ideologies. Marxism and communism follow the similar idea that everyone is entitled for the benefits in accordance of their contribution to the society and also according to their needs and abilities. The Marxist or the communist theory developed by Karl Marx and his ally Friedrich Engels argued that each and everyone should and must reap the benefits of their labor and efforts but are prevented due to capitalist measures. They further argued that leads to the formation of two classes. The one who owns lands but do not work, the land owners, and the one who works but do not possess land of their own, the laborers. Marx further argued that this situation would lead to alienation. these two classes would alienate or isolate themselves from each other and also from their problems. However, this alienation and isolation will disappear if there is equal distribution of rewards of their labor, and if this achieved, then class division will cease to exist. Put simply, communism is a political system based on Marxist ideology, while Marxism can be considered as a theory. Communism was to be a global movement inspiring and expediting inevitable working class revolution throughout the capitalist world. Practical implementation of Marxism could be considered as communism. Marxism is a philosophy, while communism is a system of government based on Marxist principles. Marx envisioned a society in which workers own the means of production. In real world, communism, governments own the means of production. Now, let us move on to another ideology that is linked with this and delve into how socialism and communism differs from one another despite being constantly identified as similar ideologies.
Communism and socialism are both economic and political ideologies that aim to promote greater social and economic equality. However, there are key differences between the two. Communism is a radical form of socialism that seeks to abolish private ownership of the means of production and establish a classless society in which all property and resources are owned and controlled by the community as a whole. In a communist society, the government owns and controls all property and resources and makes all decisions about their use and distribution. Socialism, on the other hand, is a more moderate form of socialism that seeks to establish a more equal distribution of wealth and resources, but still allows for some private ownership of the means of production. In a socialist society, the government may own and control certain key industries and resources, but private individuals and businesses may still own and operate other businesses. In summary, communism is a more extreme form of socialism that aims for a classless society with no private ownership and government control of all resources and property, while socialism aims for a more equal distribution of wealth and resources, but allows for some private ownership. Moving on, let us find out the current state of communism in today's time.
Communism in its purest form has never been successfully implemented in a single nation, and before it was destroyed in 1991, the Soviet Union had widely established communism. And now, there are just 5 countries left in the world that still adhere to various kinds and degrees of communist ideology. China, Cuba, North Korea, Vietnam, and Laos are among them. And now, let us have a quick pick the country that remain communist up until today. First is China. Communism was entrenched in China through the establishment of the Chinese Communist Party led by Mao Zedong in 1949. However, China started moving toward a mixed economy through the Deng Xiaoping Chinese economic reform in the 1970s. The reform encompasses allowing private enterprises and the phasing out of collective farm. In 2004, China changed its constitution to recognize private property. The second one is Laos. Laos became a communist state in 1975 following a revolution supported by Vietnam and Soviet Union. In 1988, it started allowing some forms of private ownership and joined the WTO or the World Trade Organization in 2013. And the third country that remains communist up until today are the Cuba. Fidel Castro took over Cuba in 1953 and established a communist state by 1965 with a strong ties with the Soviet Union. However, when the Soviet Union dissolved, the country went into economic crisis. The Partido Comunista de Cuba is described by the Cuban Constitution as the leading force of the society of the state. And now we're going to go to the fourth country that remains communist up until today, which is Vietnam. Vietnam became a communist nation in 1975 through the communist leader Ho Chi Minh. However, the country began a slow transition to a market-based economy in 1986. The country that remains communism up until today are North Korea, when Kim Il-sung led North Korea to declare its independence in 1953 with the help of China and Russia. The North Korean approach included both communal farming and government planning, where in 2002, the nation started legalizing semi-private markets. And in today's generation, there are still many active groups and organizations that are still fighting for the communist ideology and fight their own government to show their belief.
A century has passed since communists first came to power. As mentioned by the previous speakers, what was supposed to only be a call for workers' revolt turned into a global revolution, one that is big enough to actually impact, inspire, and repel millions around the globe. There is no question about its relevance, as it is an ideology that promised to ultimately create a communist utopia. Communism was created as the idea of living in a society where class divisions does not exist. All people are equal, and there is no room for personal greed. And that thought brought hope to people who suffered under those who are in power. Because of its enticing everyone is equal ideology, at its peak it attracted millions of people and gained loyal followers. In 1985, at the height of the Cold War, nearly one-third of the world's population lived under communism, mostly in the Soviet Union and its Eastern European satellite republics, and it became a relevant and popular ideology. However, after the Berlin Wall fell and the Soviet Union collapsed, the relevance of this ideology in the political world and the world as a whole started to dwindle. Why? Because scholars and experts believed that its fall and death were strong signs that communism would not work in the long run, and it just boils down to an over-centralized, oppressive, bureaucratic, and rigid economic and political system. As far as history is concerned, all the leaders who tried to achieve communist utopia wasted not just billions of money, but also lost countless of lives. Its adherents believed that building communism required the uprooting of capitalist beliefs and the purging of those who clung to bourgeois or counter-revolutionary ways of thinking. Millions of people were packed off to prison camps, and millions more died of starvation, exposure, and executioners' bullets in the quest to build a communist future. China, Cuba, Laos, North Korea, and Vietnam are the only 5 nations that have communist systems today. Notably, most of these nations have relaxed some of their most rigid policies in the name of economic progress and global trade. The Soviet Union was an experiment in communism that was created in 1921 and collapsed in 1991, leaving behind 15 former Soviet socialist republics to rebuild their economies from scratch. None chose communism as a model. This is enough proof that after the Soviet Union was dissolved, a lot of people most likely lost trust in the communist model as something that would successfully create a society without class divisions, as the people had witnessed the implications of the steps needed to achieve a communist utopia. But although the ideology in itself is objectively not really considered relevant in today's time, the other ideas that accompanied communism are alive and well in some modified forms and are still shaping modern democracies and economies around the world. Now on to the most asked question that people has for any political ideology, the issue of whether or not it can be considered a solution for world polity.
Communism, both as an ideology and a system, will never be a solution for world polity for 3 reasons. First, it doesn't encompasses the influence of different set of groups, people, and culture. The framework just doesn't work the same with being a ideology. Since it is not perfect, it is far from perfect. No other nation would ever support communism, since if we are going to analyze the global relations, structures, and practices, it is very different. Second, there is no country that revolves on pure communism that is well developed on their own right, and there are certain implications of it as well, since communism is not flawless. It doesn't change the world polity, and it would never be a solution for the world polity. The third and the last one that defines it all, in a communism society, personal autonomy must be sacrificed for the sake of the group. This implies that whatever sacrifices of a person makes are not for their family, but rather for some vague or undefined group. Only those at the top of the heap are successful. Its government is inefficient, dishonest, brutal, and wasteful. Even though democracy is far from perfect, the hope of the homogeneous balance between nations could not be fixed by the communism, since democracy is far better than any other ideology for world polity. Therefore, we as part of our own very unique society must be able to adapt certain changes. But if we lose the right for change, it will never be for world polity, because you would lose your sense of identity and culture, relieving the issue that no other country that is part of pure communism is good. Majority of them met the tragic end. To conclude, communism is not a great choice, not a better solution, not a perfect one or ultimate one. It is the worst solution for world polity. We hope this video helped you to understand deeper the concept of communism. Now we present to you a short and simple song about communism. Lyrics by yours truly and sung by Miss Mendez, Mr. Peralta, and myself in tune of Anti-Hero by Taylor Swift.
I am the one of the most influential economic theory. Class society is my goal. Those private property who are owned by the capitalist people, replaced with the public and state's control.
Sing from commerce on devices to come up with low prices, suffices, I end up the prices. I wake up redeeming from dreaming, one day I'll watch your gleaming, cause you get tired of this gaming for the last time.
It's me, hi, I'm communism, it's me. After all time, everybody agrees that everyone should fight this chaos and treat it equally. Must be exhausting, always rooting for communism.